COO of the Mayo Clinic platform, who will deliver a keynote address. This represents a tremendous opportunity for everyone in the healthcare sector to explore collaborations with Mayo Clinic and discover how better to serve patients. We thank Maneesh for traveling all the way to deliver this keynote address and to help healthcare providers foster meaningful partnerships with Mayo Clinic. Maneesh, come forward please. Thank you.
What is actually happening at Mayo Clinic? We often hear about AI as a future concept, and at Mayo Clinic it is very much a present-day concept. Oh, there we go. Thank you. So just a quick background for those that don't know who Mayo Clinic is. We are an academic medical center, 2 medical schools, 3 sites in the United States. We see 1.2 million patients a year from 140 different countries, and we specialize in complex or serious medicine. We're the largest whole organ transplant organization in the United States. So it's really a special place. If you look at the logo, you'll see 3 shields. So we have a care institution, we have 2 medical schools, and we do about $1.5 billion of clinical research, mostly translational research. As you heard earlier, we're 160 years old, really built on the foundation that healthcare should be constantly evolved. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. This whole notion of AI, data-driven decision-making, precision medicine, they're all words, but we're actually putting them into practice. So this is a slide that should be pretty near and dear to everybody's heart. The idea of moving care from reactive to preventative, from symptom-based medication to molecular medication, from having to go to a hospital to getting care delivered in the home. For a lot of you, you might know that the very notion of a hospital was a concept that was born 160 years ago. But the reality is that patients have been getting care in their home for a lot longer. And what we're trying to do at Mayo Clinic is to move more and more care into the home, away from a physical infrastructure. So how are we doing that? So 5 years ago, our current CEO charged us with re-architecting Mayo Clinic. We've committed a little over $10 billion, $10 billion US dollars, to completely re-architect the physical footprint of Mayo Clinic, as well as the technology footprint. I'm going to talk mostly today about the technology footprint. So 5 years ago, we did something that was pretty, I'd say, audacious. We took all of our clinical knowledge and put it into the cloud. Today, that's 50 petabytes. That's 50 petabytes of data on 30 years of Mayo Clinic's history on 8 million patients. And we organized it. We de-identified it, and we made it available to all of our researchers inside of Mayo Clinic. But then we went around the globe and we found other partners. We found partners that were doing similar model of care, high quality institutions. So you see some of their names up there. System in Canada, South America. We said, let's partner with the best institutions in the world. And by organizing all of that data, we now have the largest representative data set in the world of a very diverse patient population. We're actively engaged in India to partner with the leading institutions to join this network. But we didn't stop there. We said, okay, that's great. It'll help each of these organizations. How do we make it available to now about 140 companies and counting? These companies are many like yours. They have an innovative idea. They might be identifying disease early. They might be enabling precision medicine. But what's the hardest thing to do when you're creating an AI-based company? Access to data. We made it available. We have an accelerator that allows for rapid access. Because we recognize that if we don't unleash this data set, we're going to make it very difficult for the world to innovate. So Mayo clinicians and physicians curated these solutions. We know that they've been validated on high quality data. What if we actually brought it to you? And that's what we've done. We've partnered with 65 health systems to bring all those solutions. Because what's the second hardest thing if you're trying to create innovation? Finding customers. And that is what we've actually been spending our time quietly over the last 5 years. So our job as Mayo Clinic is to make data available, have experts available, and then bring those solutions to a growing list of systems across the planet. So that's all great. Let's talk about what's actually possible. Why does this matter? And I'm going to pick a handful of stories for you guys. But before we do that, just a little bit of a backdrop. When I say data, billions of clinical notes, hundreds and thousands of hours of surgical videos. Mayo Clinic has 100 million pathology slides, and we've basically created a robotic automation to scan those slides. So independently, those are interesting, but you put it all together against a 30-year clinical record, and you can actually see how diseases manifest themselves over decades. You can see how different decisions on care pathways, where you take a pharmaceutical A or pharmaceutical B and see how they perform against different genotypes. So I'm going to show you a couple of different examples to make this come to life. 9 months ago, we hired a neuro-oncologist. This particular neuro-oncologist practices medicine in, it's a horrible condition. 18% survival rate at Mayo Clinic, 1/8. So it's a death sentence. In the United States, the FDA-approved drugs don't change the outcomes. They just prolong life by weeks. This physician always had an inkling that there are particular drugs that you give for patients with this disease to manage side outcomes. She couldn't figure out what it was. Within 3 weeks of joining the Mayo Clinic, she got access to this data and found some interesting, share the names of the drugs. But patients who received an unrelated drug that was to manage symptoms, in this case, seizures, performed much better. That's the yellow curve. So what does this mean? So now we're able to look at this data set and say, normal course of treatment at arguably the best hospital in the world, that's the blue line. But for those lucky patients who happen to get this one particular drug for managing their seizures, their outcomes were markedly better. Now you might be asking yourself, well, why didn't we just do this in the first place? It's because we didn't have the data at our fingertips. So we can talk about, this is easy. This changed the practice of glioblastoma at Mayo Clinic overnight. So we're running a clinical trial to make sure that this is validated. But she found some interesting other facts. Patients who had their A1C, like glucose level, managed in a tight band had an 8% better outcome. Now, for the physicians in the room, you might say, well, that makes sense. Cancer dysregulates the glucose pathways. But what happens when you have a cancer diagnosis? Everything else goes out the window. So if you were diabetic or not diabetic, you basically have those things are not managed. Everybody focuses on cancer. But what we found is that when patients who had their A1C managed better had an 8% better survival rate. Right. Again, nothing I just said anything about AI or anything. But that very fact has now changed how we practice medicine at Mayo Clinic. So as we move forward as a society, as a species, access to large data sets like this are going to change medicine very rapidly. This is one example amongst many. We're doing this prostate cancer. It's a horrible condition. The therapy that's required is life altering. So if you can manage the disease pathways very closely, you can actually change people's standard of care. But we've done this for breast cancer. We've done this for genomic medication for oncology. But now, inside of Mayo Clinic, we have over 500 AI-based algorithms that are based on data science running actively. This is just everyday practice at Mayo Clinic now. In fact, we're actually flipping it. We're taking all of this data and have it and produce a hypothesis. So if you think about research, what is research? It's a hypothesis driven by somebody who's really educated around a particular topic, and then you validate that against data set or a clinical trial. But if you have large enough data set, you can actually have the data speak to you and produce hypotheses that you can then validate. So we're re-architecting our entire research apparatus to benefit from data, having agents produce hypotheses, and then our research function actually does the analysis. Kind of flips the entire model on its head, if you will. And our global partnership ecosystem today consists of organizations that are academic partners, as I mentioned earlier. But it also consists of health systems that will never be able to get care the same way. So India has the same problem. We've got the CMCs, the AIMS, the JIPMERs. If you go to one of those organizations, if you're lucky to get care there, you're in really good hands. If you go to rural hospitals, it's harder because the resources aren't the same, the education of the clinical staff is not the same. But if we can actually create a tighter ecosystem where data and knowledge is shared more seamlessly, we can actually improve patient care quality across the network. And that's what we've done. So at Mayo, all of that AI that's being produced, we've now made it available to health systems in every part of the world. I'll give you one final example. One of our cardiologists of two cardiovascular conditions. One is a low ejection fraction for those cardiologists out there. The other is long QT. Those conditions are only caught when there's a cataclysmic event for the patient, a real acute infarction. We're now able to get that diagnosis just looking at the 12-lead ECG data set. So now cardiovascular workup for general surgery, great, good for Mayo Clinic. But we've now made that available in Africa, our partners in Asia, our partners in Europe, so that those algorithms are now validated at Mayo but available to the world. And so what I'm here to talk about is we can all live in our own little silos and try to solve these problems ourselves or do this collectively. And at Mayo, we're a not-for-profit system. We deliver high-quality care, and what you see is numbers up there that show we're now partnering with the world. And I'm excited. You know, I was born in a small town up north in Ajmer, Rajasthan. Interestingly, there was a Mayo College there too. I'm excited to partner more closely with India to share knowledge, share data, and make care better for everyone. So thank you for having me, and I appreciate it.